All right, so yeah, at this point, if you've joined us so far in all of our sessions, we covered a lot of information today. We talked about what to consider when implementing new software, highlighting the library configuration, CNC integrations, and the benefits of taking the time to build out the reports that you need to run an efficient production workflow. We also reviewed 2D and 3D drawing processes with Amy and learned how to configure custom cabinets with Roman. And then finally, just a moment ago, the last hour, we spent working on custom tools as part of the solid modeling tools that we offer, as well as the extruded tools. And so now it's time to review the process of how all of this data gets out to your production environment, how all of these products that we build work that way. And so we're focusing on the role of the production engineer. And here to show you how all of this works is Ed. So thanks again for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Clay. Just a couple items about myself. I do have 20 years of experience in the millwork industry, and I did spend about 5 years as the role of a production engineer. So I'm very familiar with this of how to get the shop or get the product out onto the shop floor using the Microvellum. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen. So as Clay said, we basically have been taking you through the different steps of how to draw the cabinets in Microvellum, how to make some modified cabinets, and James did a great job of some of the specialty cabinets. So now basically it would get to the point where the drawings were sent out to the customer, they were approved, you have field measurements. Now you want to be able to take that data and then get that product out to the shop floor by creating the G code and reports. And that way the guys out in the shop can go ahead and start building the cabinets. So I do have an example here of, a simple L-shaped condition of some cabinets. I do have a couple specialty parts or specialty cabinets that I can go ahead and also process. With Microvellum, it's very similar with some of the stuff in AutoCAD where there's multiple ways of doing things. Like if you're familiar with AutoCAD, there's 3-4 different ways of drawing a circle or a line. With Microvellum, we've kind of have the same thing where you can do different Microvellum commands multiple ways, and especially when it comes to creating work orders or processing your cabinets. We have a couple tools here in this interface that allow us to edit the work order. We can create a work order from the drawing, and I would say we have an older version of creating a work order. Me personally, I didn't really use it much just because it involved a few more steps. The create a work order from drawing is a great tool where if you're actually before the production and you're doing some drafting and you want to make sure everything is going to get cut correctly, it's a great tool to be able to just highlight one single product and then bring up the product list, and you can process that cabinet and actually see how it's going to lay out on your nested sheets, or if you're cutting it on a point-to-point. So we do have some great tools here to use. The one tool that I liked and I used the most was the product list. This is a great way to start to review your products inside of this drawing. I felt like this was a good time to double check. It's very easy for, a drafter to be drawing in one room that has PL1 and then jump to a room that maybe has PL2, but then go back to the other one. Unfortunately, there's certain times when Microvellum remembers like different spec groups. So in theory, you could put a cabinet in a different room that they may not catch that's on a different spec group. So if you actually come into the product list and you see the list of all your cabinets, you have the different quantities, the width, height, and depth. all of these headers here, you can actually click on and sort. What that allows you to do is kind of sort by the spec group, and then you can kind of look at each of these and go, okay, I have a PL1 upper, and you start looking at them, but then you notice, why is there a 4-drawer base cabinet on a PL1 upper spec group? That would set off some bells and whistles of like, okay, is that correct? Is that incorrect? There is a reason why we named the spec group PL1 upper, so most likely that is incorrect. So right here, I was able to catch an error that maybe in the drafting portion or in the CAD, you might have not have seen that right away. So it's a great way to catch different things here. So what this allows me to do here is I can just double click on the spec group, and I'm going to go ahead and change that to the WV-1 base and hit OK. And now it's going through and it basically updated that spec group for that cabinet. So now I can come back into here and sort again. And then I see this random veneer spec group that I'm going to click on. And again, it looks like there was an error of which spec group that cabinet was placed on. So again, I can double click on this. And this time I'm going to change it to PL1 upper. And now when I sort, we can basically see that all my base cabinets are now on a WV-1 base. If I click on the PL1 upper, I should have all my upper cabinets, including the 2-door refrigerator enclosure tall. So now I can actually see that all my cabinets are in the correct spec group. Another thing that you may notice here is I have several items that are blue in color, and then I have a couple items that are black. What that is telling, us as users is the ones that are in blue actually means that there's a pretty picture and it's drawn in CAD. So if I would go back to the CAD drawing, I'd be able to see that particular item number in that cabinet. These particular 2 items are actually a quantity of 4 for each of them, are items that you can literally add to this list without drawing them in CAD. Maybe at the last minute, the project manager came up to you and said, hey, I need some ADA finished brackets that are plastic laminate. Then you can just drop them right in here. You don't physically have to draw them in CAD. If this is a product that you've done over and over and over, and you're confident that it's going to machine it correctly, you don't have to put it in the drawing. Another thing that you can actually do in this list is you can include items that aren't even going to get machined. What I did here was, if I come into my pull down menu here, I actually have a list that's called loose packing list items. I don't know if you've ever worked for a company that you usually send out shop drawings, but it's kind of a hassle to remember to include them. What you can actually do is create a loose packing item called shop drawings. And if I right click on this and add to project here, it does bring up the prompts. It's just blank prompts and everything. One thing that I like to do is when it comes to like loose shipping items, I would like use a super high number like 99901 and then hit OK. And now when I sort, my shop drawings are at the very end. Let's say that you needed to include some Z-clips. Again, I can right click on here, add to the product or project. It remembered my last one. I'll hit OK. In the comments here, maybe I don't want, I'm going to include these 2-inch shelf clips, but I don't want it to be itemized like 200 or whatever, I can come into the comments and go quantity of 40 and hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and add some 72-inch clips. And I can also write in the comments here, and let's say that I only need 10 of these. And so now I have these loose shipping ticket items. The reason that you would do this is it's not going to give you any machining or anything. It's not going to nest anything. However, it will come across on your reports. And that's where it's nice to add them here versus trying to remember adding it to the reports. It's a lot easier to just, add them here versus say if you printed out a PDF and then you're trying to edit that PDF and trying to add on there, add shop drawings or these Z clips. Why not just add them right here into the product list, and then it kind of follows the rest of the data that you're working with. You can also set it up where, it could be hardware items, and then it populates your hardware report. So then when you're looking at that, you can see your Z clips right there. So then you're not going to forget to order those for this particular project. So with this interface here in general, we have made some improvements on this interface, and it kind of looks familiar with the processing center. If you used Microvellum before and you're familiar with the processing center, this is going to be very familiar. If you're a new user, it's going to be great that both of these are now similar, because with this interface, it actually allows you to right click in this area, and we can actually look at the grid view settings. And what this allows you to do is you can actually click on different categories. One is you can actually have that icon there of CAD, and now you can physically see a little dot that represents all of these that are in the drawing, and you can see the black item numbers are not in the CAD. So it's just another way to be able to help you distinguish what's in the drawings and what's not in the drawings. So you can change the order, you can add different things. This is on a computer by computer basis. So if I have it set one way, my colleague has it set a different way, we both can have different views of the data. You can certainly save your views, and if you're working on a network with the server, these views would be available from everybody that's using it. So if somebody wanted to use my view, they could certainly use it, or I could use one of my coworkers for the views. So you do have that option of being able to customize this view a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave the CAD there for right now. So now that I've kind of reviewed and double checked everything and made sure everything's the right size, I have everything on the right spec group by using the headers here and sorting. Now I can get ready to make a work order that will allow me to generate that G code. So again, we have some different ways of creating the work orders. We can basically create a new work order, but this option here requires you to do a little extra legwork of actually picking the cabinets in a tree view. I personally like using these two options here just because you have better control and you can visually see what you're selecting. For example, if you're a company that wants to just do one spec group at a time or one color at a time, you could certainly highlight these items right here and then go ahead and create a work order from selected products. And then you would come back and do the same thing with, say, the WV-1 base. Or you could just select the entire list and do everything. And then you don't have to worry about selecting each one. If you got, 50, 60 cabinets and you can't see all the cabinets, this is a great tool to use to be able to select all of them and not have to worry about, did I select that last one or did I not select the last one? The other option is to actually come over into the list here and create new placeholder folders. For example, I can come in here and create a new room, but I can call it work order 101. And then also come back over here and create another room and call this work order 121. And these would just be placeholders. There would not be any drawings associated to these particular rooms. And as you can see, when I click on work order 121 or 101 and 121, there are no cabinets in here. But that allows me to take items in here and move them to these particular work orders. Where that comes in handy is, if you have a large job that your company only does 15 or 20 cabinets at a time, you can drop your cabinets into these work orders. In this case, I might want to do my custom products, the bench seating and the island that has a lot of machining on it, or maybe it goes to a different department. Maybe I want to do that work order first, get it out to the shop and have them begin to work on it, because maybe it takes longer for them to do those than putting regular cabinet boxes together. So it's a great way to kind of break everything up. The other thing is, if I highlight these two items here and I move them to work order 101, and I can just right click, move to another room, move to work order 101, hit OK. It's no longer in this list. And when I click over here in work order 101, now I see those two particular items. And currently there is nothing in work order 121. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to use the remaining items here, and I'm going to process all of these into work order 121. And I just select that work order. And now if you're looking at it and you had a large project and now this was your master room, you would come in here and you would see nothing in here. And you can basically say, yep, I released all the cabinets that are part of this because there's no cabinets here, and all the cabinets are broken into each of the work orders. If you did want to see all of the cabinets together, you could certainly click on the project name, and now you can see all the cabinets are together. And then when you start clicking on each of the different rooms, you can see how they're broken out. And it's very easy to move them from one work order to another. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and process work order 121 first here, which is just generic cabinets with a few shipping items, and then also some last minute ADA finished end panels. So since I have everything broken out here, I don't really need to select them again. I can just say, create a work order from the entire list. This populates a dialog box that allows you to, you can certainly come up with a naming convention for your company. It might be job number, it might be project number, it could be work order number. We do have some tools in here for the properties. Actually, it's configure name, and this allows you to set some defaults that every time that you open up a work order or create a work order, it's automatically going to default to the project name or the job number. In my situation here, it's basically defaulting to a date timestamp. You can use that also, and you could put a project name in front of that, and then you would know exactly when that particular work order was created. Or you could use your username. You can just put in my case, just put Ed in front of that, and then I know that I was the one that created this work order. We also have some newer tools of like select the recent name. You can see I pretty much use the date timestamp for my recent names, but if you were doing a large project that was consistently like Target, and you were doing a project for the Target stores, you could have that in your list here, and then you wouldn't have to type that in every single time. So you do have the option there. There are a few check marks here to make note of. If you do have some custom reports that are bringing in images, you would want to make sure that you have processed flatshot tokens. What that's going to do is it's going to create the drawings to go, with that particular product. And then when you print that report, it will give you a pretty picture of, what you might be working on or for that particular product. I know it came up earlier, doing work orders for like stone or metal or like that, and maybe you need DXF files. Here's where you can create those DXF files that you could send to a vendor, and then they could cut what you needed to be done. So you do have that option to create the DXF files, which is a fairly universal format for a drawing program. For most people can open that up if you have different CAD versions. And then there is create the WMF images for all parts. It just gives you that little image, like if you have like edge banding, or even for your labels for doing a generic picture for each product. Another newer feature of Microvellum is to print work order report groups. What that allows you to do is when you determine which reports that you want to print for every single work order, let's say that you need to print some different nesting reports for your CNC, hardware report, edge banding report, and shipping ticket. You can actually set up Microvellum so every time that you process a work order, it will actually print those reports for you automatically, which would save you some time. You can certainly print them to paper right away, or you can print them to a PDF, and then they get dropped into a folder that you can just go into that one folder. You have all 5 of your reports. Then you could move them to the correct location if your shop is going paperless, or if you do need to print them, then you can just print them from there, and you didn't have to click on each report that you needed to print. So you can certainly check that there. Since I used one of these icons here, creating a work order from the entire list, it did come in here and added all your check marks for these particular products. So you don't have to come in here and actually physically check each of these. That's why it's kind of nice to use these features versus creating a new work order, because you would have to physically come in here and check them. There might be some times when you might want to do that, or maybe you want to deselect 1 or 2. You can certainly still do that after the fact. So now I know which ones that I'm going to process. I have everything set up for the right options that I want. And then I have a work order name that's also in the list here, which now I can go ahead and hit process. So depending on how many products you have in here is going to determine, how fast it is. I do have a couple products that I added in here, those ADA. Right now, there's just an issue with the pricing, but it's not going to affect the processing it. It's just, there's no price associated inside the database for those, which if that was something that you're using over and over, you could certainly go in and add those products to your database in Microvellum, and then you wouldn't get that error message. Okay, so one thing that I like to do here is just take note of this. I was the type of person that always kind of looked at this and everything, just because I was creating the same work order over and over and everything. So I just would take note of that. And in this case here, I did process 218 parts here. So I am going to go ahead and create this work order. And so now it did bring up my processing center. And what it did was it took all those products that I had in that list, and now it broke each of those products into individual parts, so you can see all the different parts that are associated with that one cabinet. It gives you all the different names, the quantity, the width, length, the material. And again, this is no different than the parts list or the product list, where I can click on each of these headers here and it allows me to sort. And now I can see all the 1/4-inch Baltic birch is together, all the 1/4-inch white melamine. So again, this is a great way to double check what's going on with everything with your products and your parts. If you sort by part name, you can look at all your base backs, and then if you see something that says 1/4-inch plastic laminate, you might ask yourself, why is that 1/4-inch plastic laminate versus white melamine? Or all your bottoms, you can see here that they're all 3/4-inch, two-sided. It's a great way to see, oh, wait a second, you know what? These nailers, I don't want to be on particle board. Unfortunately, if that was the case for this here, I am not able to just click on this and change this material here. I know we've made some improvements of doing that. I know there's been a lot of requests of wanting to be able to modify the parts in here. It's just one of those things that we have to be very careful of giving that ability or using that ability, because if you start making changes here, they do not affect your drawings. So you could make a change here and then find a different mistake and reprocess it and then not make that change again. And it just could be a vicious cycle of where do you make the changes. Ultimately, I personally felt that it was better to go back into the actual CAD drawings and make the change there. And it doesn't take too long to just reprocess it. I know it's kind of an extra step, or it can be a pain to do that, but you're also making sure that you're doing everything correctly. With this here, as I said, with the product list and with the processing center here, we can right click here and go into the grid settings. And again, we can make changes to this. One of the changes that I always made was, right now you can see all your parts and you can see the edge banding, but then I have to scroll over to see what's assigned to each of the tools. I wasn't a big fan of constantly scrolling over to make sure that I had everything. I know edge banding is important and everything, but at this point in the stage, hopefully the edge banding is correct on the parts, and I shouldn't really have to double check to make sure that the parts have the correct edge banding. You can certainly sort by these here and group them all together to take a quick look, but in a sense, I didn't value this data as much as the machinery that the parts were assigned to. So I actually could come up here into the grid settings, and I already created a new view. And what this allowed me to do is I was able to move all my machinery, the categories, into here, and now my edge banding is off to the right. So I can still see the edge banding and everything. And if I truly needed to check something, I would scroll over to that, which might be a little less than me having to look at the different equipment or what everything is assigned to. So right now I have all the parts, but if we look at these columns here, which actually correspond to the processing stations, we cannot generate any G code until we assign the parts to a specific processing station, which actually has a tool file associated with it. So one thing with the processing stations is that you can have the same tool file that is used over and over, but have different processing stations. And what that means is there's some different settings in here. For example, I have a default nest and a default true nesting, but they're using the same tool file. The difference is when I click on true nesting and I go into the nest options, I actually have a slider bar here that allows me to turn on the true nest shape. Typically, I try to keep it in the middle. It's kind of the happy medium between giving you a really good optimization with custom parts versus high end right here, where you might gain a little bit in the optimizations, but it's going to increase your processing time dramatically. So I think we found like the happy medium was more to the middle, maybe just one tick past the middle. You can also change the distance between parts. One example that I did for my company was we had a nested CNC, and occasionally we did hardwood, curved hardwood edging. And what that allowed me to do is create one that said hardwood, and I was able to come in and change the spacing between the parts, because with hardwood, we wanted to use like a 7/8 serrated bit to cut the hardwood. If I would have kept one of the other default ones, the spacing was set at a 1/2 inch. And so then my parts would have been cutting into one another, or they would have been placed too close. So we can't process any of these parts until we assign the processing stations here. So I'm going to go back into the grid settings, and actually I kind of noticed that if I go into the processing stations, it actually affects my grid settings. So I may have to have Clay look into that to see if that is something that we kind of know about, because right now all my edge banding is back up above where it originally was, and I actually don't want that there. So I'm going to go ahead and just move those down quick. And that way we can see when I assign the processing stations a little bit better here. And we're going to go ahead and save this and close. So now, actually one thing that came up with my session yesterday was true nesting versus nested. Why not true nest everything? The reason you typically don't true nest everything is because square parts or rectangular parts, obviously you're not going to get much better yield. And then the second thing is grain. If you use true nesting, it basically strips the grain off of that part, even if it's on a grain material. So, you know, one of the questions was with like ADA panels. What if I wanted to nest them a little bit better? So then I get better yield. So that is one reason I kind of included these extra items here. If I scroll down here, so I have these ADA finished end panels and everything. So what I'm actually going to do here is, with this particular example, I'm going to nest it both ways, where I'm going to true nest it and then also use just the default. So first thing I'm going to do is highlight all of these parts, and I can use select all parts, and I'm going to use my default nest first, and I'm going to assign all my parts to that. And let's go ahead and hit process. And what comes up here is phase 6 versus phase 5, which means that I have machining on the underside of parts. In this case, there is nothing on phase 5, so I'm going to just say okay to flipping all of those. And it is going through 195 parts, and now it completed. I'm going to go ahead and just clear everything out here and have nothing selected. And now I'm going to come back and do the exact same stuff, but use true nesting and show you the difference between the two. And go ahead, and this time I'll make a batch 2. The batch name can be a company naming, however you want to name it. You might want to have the job number and then B1, or maybe you have a work order number. In this case here, I'm just doing B1 or B2 for like batch 1, batch 2. I'm going to go ahead and hit process again. And, you know, one comment, you can, you know, set up your materials so you don't have to worry about this. You would do that at the material level. And because if you're dealing with particle board, most likely it's not going to matter if you flip it. If you're working with, you know, a liner PL1, you might want to actually not flip that, because in this case, I am going to uncheck that because I probably don't want to flip it, because then the machining would be put on the wrong side. And with the batch name, also realize spaces can also be an issue. I know comment was made that it does feed into the machine name or the G code name. So if you would put in a space and have barcodes, you could run into some issues that way. So if you needed to place a space, you would actually use the underscore symbol. So technically it's not a space per se. It would be another character. So it is taking a little bit longer because it's trying to true nest everything. So if I would have had that slider bar all the way to the far right, it definitely would even be taken even longer than this. So now what I can do is open up my drawings, and I'm going to go into B1 first and look at the composite drawing. And you can see right here are my ADA finished end panels. And basically I have lefts and rights. If I look at 5 and look at the name down below, that's a finished left end panel. And then we have a right panel. So you can see that depending on which side it is, it's going to determine which material is up. So I do have very specific lefts and rights, because in this case here, it's liner and PL, so we were only putting laminate on one side. If they were PL on both sides, it wouldn't really matter. So you can see how everything is nested accordingly, and this was just the default nesting. If I go back into my processing center and go to open up drawing and go to B2 and open up the true nesting, and now I start looking at this, and you can see it is optimizing it better and putting things together, but you could also run into some issues that if this is a grained material like maple or oak, or maybe it has a lot of cathedral to the graining, technically they would be upside down with some of the graining. Yes, it's going vertical on these parts, but maybe that's not the look that you want for this particular end panel. Maybe the average user wouldn't notice it, but I think the people in the industry would notice that if the graining was going 2 different directions on these parts. So that's where true nesting these, yes, it gave me a better yield and everything, but it basically turned off the graining on those parts. So it kind of nested it as best as it could on that. So let's go back into my processing center here, and notice that when we look at this list and I sort by item number, we don't see any of those loose shipping items. It's because there's no material associated with, no parts. It's just kind of a placeholder. However, if I go up to my reports, and if I would have had my report groups turned on, it would actually reprinted it, but I'm going to just go in and look at an individual report. And if I scroll down and look at my product shipping manifest, so like a shipping ticket, I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And let's bring this over here. And if I scroll down, you can see shop drawings 999.01. Then we can see here's my Z clips, and I can see my quantity of 40. This is one version. Actually, there was a better one. Actually, the product summary delivery receipt is the kind of the shipping ticket that I wanted to show you. It's a little cleaner and only 1 page. And right here, how nice would it be to be able to be in the shipping department and see at the very end of your list, shop drawings. The office didn't give them to the shipping department. He can call up the office and say, hey, do you want these shop drawings shipped out with this particular project? Then you can also see some of the additional hardware. Basically, it itemized the Z clips, and he can see that there needs to be 40 of them, and he can check that off. And when it's sent out to the job site, whoever's receiving it can check that off. And at least then you do have some kind of record of, if the job soup calls back and says, hey, you know what, we didn't get any Z clips, you can kind of look back at your shipping report and say, well, so-and-so signed forms, so are you sure you don't have them? So it's a good way to keep track of some of the loose items that might need to be shipped. And as you can see, it's kind of nice to put them at the very end here with a larger number. That way they're all grouped together and they're at the very end versus trying to group them in between and have cabinets and then shipping items. Just kind of a nice little clean look to the shipping report to be able to have those at the end. The other thing that we can look at here is we do have, actually, let's look at like a work order summary report. And let's look at B1 here. And now you have a nice summary of like all the products here. You do see the loose shipping items here, but now you can see how many sheets of sheet stock you need to use, the sizes. We have some buyout doors that are currently on this project. We have edge banding and some more additional hardware. And like I mentioned before, you can see at least the Z clips did show up in the hardware totals here. It doesn't have a quantity, but it'd be an easy thing to edit. And one nice thing about these reports is they're fully customizable. Obviously, you can put your own logos in here. You can change colors. And then when it comes to actually printing them, you could certainly print them as a PDF, or you could actually print them in as an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm going to just go ahead and do that on this one here. And let's just move this over. And now you can see that it actually put all those items in a spreadsheet. So if you did need to change this quantity of the Z clips to, I think I did 40 and 10, now I was able to edit those without trying to edit it in a PDF. Or now if I went back up and print as a PDF, now I would have that particular document as a PDF. There might be some different formatting issues occasionally when doing that, but now you can actually see that I was able to edit that quantity. Or you could run into a case where, you know, maybe it's like, oh, shoot, I didn't want a 7-inch pole. And you're not drilling for the poles, you could or maybe you wanted to give more description to the shop of actually the vendor name and model number. You could come in and edit that particular item here before you printed the report. Let's see here. So let's just close out of that. Let's go back and do that other work order here quick for our last few items. So I'm going to go back into my product list and I'm going to go to work order 101 and I'm going to create a new work order here. I did see that there was a, let's see, there was a question about the part name or the part groups and the default status. I believe these were created for a custom customer that they wanted some extra control over it. And I think, Clay, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Are these getting phased out of this dialog box? Or, you know, I thought the last time I heard they were being used for a specific customer.
Yep, to my knowledge, they are not being phased out, but we can definitely look into that if somebody has questions about them.
Okay, sounds good. So again, I'm going to go ahead and just keep the date timestamp here and hit process here. And I created 107 parts here. So another thing that can be done to your parts, in this particular case, it might not be useful for these custom ones, but you can set up your general casework that if you wanted to auto-populate which tool that it gets machining on, you can certainly set that up, and that just requires going into your database and then finding a code and then adding it to each of the parts. If that's something that would be useful for your company, you could certainly talk to your account manager and seeing maybe getting some additional training on that, or maybe additional work on setting up your parts so they auto-populate to the machinery. Where that might come in handy is if you have certain parts that have no machining on that just get cut out, and you have a saw and a CNC, you could auto-populate those parts to the CNC, versus we do have some rules down here for each of the processing stations, where if I click on the default point-to-point and go to edit, you can see that I have some auto-assign rules that if it has machining on it, it's going to go to that particular CNC. If I click on the default saw and come into here, you can see that includes the parts that have horizontal drilling or contain horizontal drilling, or parts with no machining. So where this would come in handy is if you had a saw and a nested CNC. So any parts that didn't have any CNC on, you would send them to your saw. And then if I come into the nested CNC, it would have all the parts that had phase 5 or phase 6 machining. So we do have the capability of setting up these different rules. And what that allows you to do is to select all the parts, and by using the different rules, it will allow you to determine if that part needs to go to the CNC or if it needs to go to the saw. For this example here, it's probably not the best one to do, so I'm actually going to go back into, I'm going to change my work order back to the other one that had the general casework in, just to kind of show you the rules. And I'm going to select all my parts and clear all the machining. And let's say that you are a company that have a nested CNC and a saw. And so I'm going to highlight both of those. And by using the double check mark, it's going to allow me to assign the processing station rules to the selected parts. And you can see now that we have different X's for different parts. And if I sort by the saw, and then by this, and now you can see that I have all of these parts here that would just go to the saw. And that makes sense because they're your backs, your shelves. There is no machining on that. So they're just rectangular square parts that can get cut onto the saw, and they basically get cut. They can get edge banded and then maybe bored, horizontal boring, and then go to your assembly department. And if we scroll down, here's where we have different parts like upper sides. These are good examples where you do have machining on them. And so then they do go to your nested CNC, so they get cut out, and any phase 5 or phase 6 machining. So this is a great tool to use if maybe you're not as experienced with knowing which parts go where. And as long as your processing stations are set up with the right rules, you can assign those parts to the appropriate machinery. Or like I said, if you want it to be auto-populated and do every single part every single time, because you don't want your users to have to pick which station to use, you can certainly do that. The advantage of that is also where if you do auto-populate that and you decide that you do have a different CNC that you want to send them to, you can certainly clear the X's and then reassign a different CNC to it. Like for this example here, I could certainly clear the nest from these parts here, and now I could click on the point to point, and I probably need to make sure that they go to the saw also. So I'll click on both of those and use the single check mark. And now these parts would go to the saw first, and then they'd have to go to a point-to-point CNC afterwards to get the additional machining. So that's how you would basically take your cabinets and go through and process them and generate the G code. And like I showed you with the composite drawings here, you would have all your composite drawings, and each one has G code, and right here is where that batch B1 comes into play. So it does kind of reflect in the actual G code name, but now you have all these different G codes that you could send out to your CNC.